how am I going to pay myself? How much am I going to pay myself? And when am I going to pay myself? Hi, I'm Kathy.
And I'm Vanessa, and this is Latinx Collective Conversations, where we talk about private practice, mindset, and building community as Latinx clinicians. And in addition to all those things, today we're talking about money.
Your favorite topic.
I mean, it's always great to have a lot of money, to make a lot of money, but in private practice, how is that all coming to fruition?
And what I should say is math, not your favorite topic. And we're going to talk a little bit about math today. Right.
Yes, don't get
So,
scared, people.
yes, some math. I know therapist math, yuck, spreadsheets, figuring numbers out, not our favorite. Right. But we are going to talk about some numbers. We're going to talk about those questions. How do I pay myself? When do I pay myself? And how much? Why those questions? Because those are the questions we get most commonly in the collective. And just in general, when I'm talking to people about opening up a private practice, the question is like, first of all, do I just take money out of the bank and just pay myself? How do I do that? And when do I do it? Do I do it once a week? Once a month, and then how much? I think you've probably heard this too, Vanessa, like the fear of if I take too much. And even sometimes we hear people are like, I'm not paying myself right now.
Yeah, I'm really familiar with that feeling. Remember, I did private practice 2 years, I believe, part time before going full time and leaving my career in schools. And at first, I wouldn't pay myself, but it was done with intentionality because I said, if I plan to one day, I didn't know when exactly it would be. If I plan to one day leave schools, I need to have a nest egg and make sure that I'm safe and secure because you want to make smart decisions and not just get mad one day and say, I'm leaving, and then not have anything to fall back on.
Yeah. Well, and going to that, like you were saying, you had a security, right? And your
Yeah.
security was that you were still at your full time job. And I did it the same way too. And we talked about this that I've transitioned out. So I was in a job that I could go from 40 hours and I went to 30 hours and 20 hours. And then once, I was at 20 hours, I was pretty busy and full that I was able to leave. But there is safety or a false sense of safety, I'm going to call it, when you're in a job and you're getting a salary. Right. So salary gives you, you know how much you're getting paid every 2 weeks or however often you get paid. So there is some safety in that. And then you have these benefits and you have maybe a retirement plan and you have other things. So why do I call it a false sense of safety? Because when you do math, you're not getting paid that much at the end of the day.
Peanuts, you get paid.
Yes, I think we did the math in one of our early collective groups, and someone was like shocked. So something like $75,000 a year. So we're going to go high, right? So if you're getting paid $75,000 a year, once they take out everything, your taxes, your health insurance, because most jobs do not pay all of your health insurance. If
Mhm.
you're contributing to a retirement plan, even if they're giving some, all of those things. And let's say if you are only working 40 hours a week, because in our jobs, we do not only work 40 hours a week. It's 40
That
hours a
is
week
right.
and then documentation too. So most of the time, you don't have that time built in to do that. So in reality, maybe you're doing more like 45, 50 hours a week. When you take all of that and you do the math, I think it was something like between 30 to $35 an hour.
That
That's what
is
we're making.
wild. Wild. And I'll share with you, I think it was maybe 2 years before I left. I was already doing private practice on the side. However, and my fault because I don't like numbers and we shouldn't have that relationship with money. And I've since changed. I still don't like numbers, but I am much, much better and very good at knowing what I'm expecting and knowing what's coming and knowing what's going out so that, again, your business is secure and then your personal life could be secure. But I remember sitting in my school counselor office and it was, I think, like the first time that I actually went through the pay stub because you see the year earning to date, right? You see the bigger number, which isn't all that big because we know that educators don't get paid nearly enough. And then I started to cry, like bawling. And so much so that my secretary, who I adored, she came in and was like, Vanessa, are you okay? And I had figured out that, yes, I was getting, and I'm really transparent with numbers because for folks who work in education and anybody for the public sector, you can always look up salary. I may have been making about $80,000 that year, but I was bringing home less than 40. So less than half
Wow.
after everything went out to insurance and retirement and disability insurance and union and all of the things. And I remember in the middle of tears and everything thinking, I have been working to that point 16 years and have a master's and have all of these things working in my favor. But yet I'm taking home less than $40,000 a year and couldn't believe that that was the reality. And I know so many people live in that fear and probably making less, bringing home less. And then how do you survive? How do you provide for
Yeah.
you and your family?
What you did in that moment, not a lot of people do. A lot of people hate math, right? I don't love math, but I do like numbers and I do like to know where everything is going and being very strategic with them. And not a lot of people will sit there and say, how much do I actually make? They make it work with what they get, right? They'll budget, they'll figure it out. They work a second job. A lot of people do that. Right. So what you did to figure out like, wow, I'm making less than $40,000 a year is not something that a lot of people do.
Yeah, and it's so necessary to do because once I did do that, and then I saw how much I was making in private practice, that's what gave me the courage. Like, no, I've got this. I'm gonna definitely be making more than I was working for school, and calling it like I say the golden handcuffs, being tied down by the golden handcuffs.
And, you said that the first time I heard that was probably in one of the groups, you saying that. But it's very true because we think salary, I'm secure and I have health insurance and I need that so much for my family. And I'm not saying that you don't, right? But we'll talk about that. And retirement, what am I going to do if I don't have a retirement plan? We'll talk about that too. But there is a lot of fear, then a lot of like false sense of security. And in my house, my mom didn't have a salary job until I want to say 15. So she would say to me, it's very important that you get a salary job. It's very important that you have benefits, that you have paid time off. That was a big deal. If my mom needed to take off or anything, she wasn't getting paid because of the type of job she had. So that was ingrained in me since I was very young that you need to have these things. So thinking about not having those things felt very, very scary.
I had the
So
complete opposite experience where my dad had his 401k and it was ingrained like you have to start saving from day one. When you start working, everything goes towards retirement. And obviously, there's value, but it doesn't mean that you can't provide that for yourself and for your family if you're not working a traditional salary job.
yeah, exactly. And so those fears come up, right? Health insurance, Kathy, how do I get it? And some people will say, oh, well, only the people that are in private practice and if their husband or their wife have health insurance, well, that's the only way you can do it because you can't actually pay for it in private practice. And no, I know that's not the case for you. Nope. And that's not the case for me. I am the one who has the health insurance. I always have been in my family. Right. So building that into my budget is very important. It is very doable. I think it feels so scary and there's a lot of ways to do it. And so many people shy away from opening up their practice or going into private practice full time because of this.
And it's really fear of the unknown. Like if you don't know how to do something, however, do you let that stop you or do you just figure it out using your resources, using, AI, using the collective and really
Yeah.
asking the questions to folks who have done it so that you can see what's going to work out for your family?
Definitely. And then retirement, right? For retirement, you can open up your own IRAs. You can have a 401k through your business, depending how it's set up and structured. And this is why you need to ask questions of what's the structure of your business, what I need. Always have a meeting with your accountant at least once a year,
Outside of when
aside
you're
from,
doing
yes,
taxes. Yes.
exactly. So that you can ask these questions and plan ahead. But all this is all to say these are doable things. There are things out there. Does it seem scary at first? Yes, we're not gonna lie about that, but it is a doable thing, and talking to other people who do it is key, and getting that information ahead of time.
Completely. And we're talking about the big things, right? Retirement and then insurance, but scaling it back and going all the way down to the first question that you ask is how do I get paid? How much do I get paid? Those are the questions that we hear all the time, especially
Yeah.
from newbies that come into private practice. But it is a doable thing. And it's wild when you think about it because if you're your own boss, you have that control that you control how much and when and the frequency, but then we shy away from that just because we've never done it before.
Yeah, and going back to that number, right? 75,000, let's go with that number. You can now make 75,000 maybe with 20 hours a week. And, like, now what are you gonna do with those extra 20 hours that you just got back, right? Or you can work 30 hours a week and now make more. to your point that you have more control over now what you can or cannot make in your schedule. So again, why I call it this false sense of security, because that's not really a secure job. Funding goes, you could go, right? They change the structure of the business because they decide to, you can go. That's not a secure job. Those jobs can go at any time. Very different from you owning your own practice, your own business, where you're controlling that, whether you want to see 30 clients, don't see 30 clients. I'm just saying, right? As an
Don't.
example. But you see 20 clients, right? You raise your rate a little bit, you drop an insurance, you add an insurance, you now have the decision to make, the power to make these decisions. I know that it is scary, but some planning involved and support can really help. But you can really make a lot more money with less time and on your terms, which is so important. That key piece that it's on your terms and what you're deciding you want to do or not do. You can decide if you want to work just 2 evenings a week instead of four, right? You can
Absolutely.
decide if you want to do Saturday or if you don't. Oftentimes, we hear stories from people who are just starting out saying, "Oh, well, I'm working, and where I'm working, I'm seeing 20 clients, or at this agency, I'm getting X amount." And again, going back to that math, you do the simple math, you can see half of those clients and still make the same amount of money. I think that's what we need to pause and think about those things and not shy away from money and not shy away from adding numbers together and figuring out things to say, I can actually do this on my own and make more or make the same with seeing less clients. I think oftentimes we think more, more, more instead of strategically, I can see less clients and make more money.
Yes, and I think it's because usually when people look at it, it's kind of like looking at it from the one side of how much are we going to charge instead of looking at it, how much would I want to make and how many vacations do I want a year? When do I not want to work? All of those questions, and then working backwards and then figuring out your rate that way so that you go into it with the bigger picture in mind as opposed to going into it from counting the peanuts one by one.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite formula, right? The 46 weeks, right? Because I'm giving
Yep.
everybody 6 weeks off. Right. So
Yep.
52 weeks in a year. No, you're not going to do 52 weeks. Like I'm going to do 20 clients, 52 weeks. That's impossible. We're not doing that. We get sick. Our kids get sick. There are holidays. Clients don't want to come in. There's Christmas. There's,
Summer.
all the holidays. Right. So 46 weeks. I'm going to say out of 46 weeks, 20 sessions a week. That's going to be your goal. That's your target. Then you figure out your salary from there. So if you hear nothing else, because there was so much information in this episode, take away that formula that I'm going to do 20 sessions a week for 46 weeks because I'm giving myself 6 weeks off out of the year. And on top of that, I'm also going to know my salary, right? So what is your salary there based off of your rate?
Yes, you can't be afraid of numbers if you want to make money. You can't be afraid of money if you want to live a lifestyle where you're going to feel comfortable and you're going to be able to provide for your family. And as you're thinking about almost like backwards by design, right? Of starting off with that number of weeks so you're not working every single week of the year, you also want to think about why is it that I think about money in this way? What are the stories that I was told about money when I was growing up? Because all of that really shapes the way that we look at numbers, that we look at money, our thoughts about having too much or too little, or living in abundance or living in scarcity. And then that's going to drive our decisions, which can sometimes work against us. So we do a lot of mindset work within the collective, especially when it comes to cultural messages that we've heard growing up, so that we can be clear with that before diving into making our practices sustainable.
And I'm really glad you said the cultural messages because I mean, we've talked about this before, but I can't stress it enough that in the collective, we do talk about the cultural messages and then we give the information,
Yeah.
right? Because I know, like, listening to this, you're like, Kathy, you're talking about 401ks and all, and, we're talking about this and Vanessa's mentioning this and all these numbers, and this can feel overwhelming, right? And listen to that. If it is overwhelming, why is this overwhelming? And what information do I need to get? Because information here is key. You need this information in order to make informed decisions, right? It's kind of like what we tell our clients, right?
Yep.
We were telling them if our clients are having irrational thoughts, you're like, wait a minute. Do we have all the facts? Do we know what's going on? Let's listen to our body and our emotions when this is going on. So very similar here. We need to get the information, but also figure out like, why am I feeling this way? Why is this? coming up for me when I'm thinking about money, when I'm thinking about rates, when I'm thinking about having to navigate insurance or 401k by myself retirement planning. But information is key.
Absolutely. And I want to just mention to people that, and we've said this before, we don't have magic fairy dust that we were born with. Like we weren't born differently. We're regular schmegular people just trying to do our best in the world and helping others. And I say that in the same breath of we had baby girls within the same year of each other, and we both have our practice and we both fund our own insurance as well for our families, and we both funded our maternity leave. So you can do all of the things with the right mindset and with the right support.
And planning ahead, right?
Yes.
Because those things like that. And some things are surprises. You have to plan for the surprises too. I was doing a small budget with someone, I think someone from the Aspiring Collective. And what I said is that I always put fees for legal aside every year in my budget. And I did not use it for 4 years. Fifth year, I used more than half
Here
of
it was.
it. I was like, oh, well, good thing you were there because I needed you, right? Something came up, you don't know, but it was in my budget and it was safe there in my high yield savings account, making some money for itself while I didn't use it. Right. But these things do come up and we have to plan for them, having conversations, getting information while you're building your practice. So going back to our original questions here, right? How we started this episode, the hows and the whens. Hopefully what you gathered is in order to figure out the hows and the whens, you have to have a plan and you have to be strategic and you need to know your numbers.
1,000%. And we always hear the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, but you can't pour from an empty financial cup either. So, how is it that then you're going to get this information? If you have all the questions, we've got you covered. We have put together two events coming up. And the first is a free training on March 30th, all about insurance, self pay, and the in between, because we know we always get a lot of questions about how to set up your practices, what insurances to take, can you survive without taking them, all of the things. And then the second one is our Money Moves for Therapists workshop on April 11th, where we'll be having a panel. We'll be bringing in CPAs. We have specific conversations centered around retirement and estate planning and all of the things. So if you want more information on either one of those events, you can visit the link in the description below.
And both of these events, well, one, the way that we try to do things is we want to give out the information. So we always have workshops that are open to everyone. And then we try to set up events where there is a fee attached to them, but with a reason, because we're going to have a CPA, a financial advisor. We have people there that really know their stuff. And to be honest, some of the stuff is, I want to know too, right? We don't know everything. I'm super interested and really excited for the estate planning one because we're going to have two breakout sessions. So these events are really, we're creating events that we know the therapists need that are in business and also events that we also are going to benefit from as well.
Absolutely. So we hope to see you there. If you have any questions, you can always email us info at latinxpracticecollective.com. And please do remember that, especially while we're talking about the topic of money, that this conversation is for educational purposes only and should not be substituted for clinical, financial, or business advice. But if you want that advice, make sure that you come to our two trainings coming up. See you there.